All right, hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Game Dev Show. I'm here today with Corvallis and Greg. We're going to be talking about AI, game development, and a lot of other stuff. And before we dive into it, though, I wanted to just mention that they both have some awesome YouTube channels that you should go subscribe to. Go check out Corvallis' channel. It's PowerCore 2000. He talks about AI development, game development, and really Corvallis is kind of one of my go-to AI experts nowadays. Highly recommend you go subscribe. And then we've also got Greg here, or Midnight Oil Software. Go check out his channel. He's been doing devlogs on game development of an actual game that we'll be talking about later on that you can go play in beta and try out. So if you want to see how that's built, see how a real game's built, dive into the process and see the devlog behind it and the play tests and stuff, make sure that you go subscribe there as well. So welcome, guys. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Always happy to be back on.
This should be a very fun one. Everybody in chat is here with lots of questions. I figure we can probably take quite a few today. Before we dive into big topics, I wanted to really briefly mention that we're doing an online AI game dev day in August. So it's going to be a free online event focused on AI and game dev. Ideally, it's going to be all actionable talks on stuff that you can use and ways that you can either use or into your workflow or to speed things up. But I don't really know all of the details yet. We're still figuring out all the sessions, but you can go sign up right now, grab a free ticket, and be ready for it when it comes in August. Now, I don't know where we should start. There's a whole lot of stuff going on this week. A whole lot of different things to talk about. I think maybe, why don't we, since Greg hasn't been on before, just start with what Greg's up to and do maybe a quick little introduction. Tell everybody about the game that you're working on, what's going on there, and then we'll go deeper.
Sure. Well, thanks. And again, thanks so much for letting me be on here. I've really been a fan of yours for at least 3 years now. So this is very exciting for me. The game is called Highland Panic, and it's a multiplayer card game, and it's cross-platform. So it's an open beta on Steam right now, as well as on the Apple App Store. And it's in closed beta on the Google Play Store right now, but I'm about to open that up to open beta there as well. And so it's based on a card game that I used to play with my kids called Dutch Blitz. And this is going to sound like an oxymoron, but it's basically multiplayer solitaire. So it has all the mechanics of solitaire, except you're playing against other people, and you're all playing to a common area in the middle. So if you're familiar with, solitaire, you've got the foundation piles where you play ace through king of the same suit. So you can play 1 through 10 of the same color in that common area. And it can get quite frantic because you're about to play a card there and somebody beats you to it. So the first player to play all 10 cards from what we call their panic pile ends the round. And then you score a point for every card that you played to that common center area. And then you lose 2 points for any cards you still have in your panic pile when the round ends. So it's been sort of a dream game of mine for a long time. And a couple of things that happened this year that really made it possible to tackle this. One was Unity, introducing their Unity, the multiplayer stuff, right? Netcode for game objects, lobby, and relay. So that was perfect for this application. And then also AI art. So pretty much all the art in this game I use Midjourney for. So those are two hurdles that I had to overcome to be able to make this game. And they both kind of got unblocked this year.
Oh, nice. So, yeah, the new netcode, that makes sense because it's all kind of integrated and they've really simplified that process. And then, yeah, I guess with a card game, one of the hardest parts, well, other than obviously building the card game, but getting so much art, because when you have so many different cards, you want to have different art for every single card. And I know a couple guys have made physical card games and digital ones, and they're always, they spend a lot of time hiring and outsourcing the artwork. So I wonder how that has changed. I assume drastically in life.
Because I really couldn't afford, I'm doing this on the side. I have a full-time job and I'm trying to maintain a YouTube channel. So I don't have a lot of extra income to throw into this. And I also don't have a lot of extra time. So I couldn't draw it myself and I wasn't going to hire somebody to do it. So I'm sure that they're seeing some hit from that.
But
Yeah.
that's also a really good use case of using like AI art generators. It puts something that was out of reach before into reach, because the process of contracting, commissioning art can be long. I've like commissioned pieces myself, but being able just to create it and tweak it just to your specifications is really helpful.
Yeah, I commissioned my logo and my intro video snippet that I use on my channel. So I'm familiar with the process. It's just for all the art I'd need for this game, I just couldn't go through that process.
Yeah, I feel like it's great for all of the art that's not like your key stuff, the things that you wouldn't normally care that much about. I mean, unless you were maybe if you're like a big artist in a big company, you're going to care and want some very specific stuff. Like Blizzard or Wizards are going to want very specific stuff for their cards. But yeah, I'm guessing that most people that want to make a card game just want something on there, and it could be asset store images or anything. They just want something that kind of matches the theme, and like this specific art isn't a huge deal per card or anything like that. It's just kind of it's kind of a placeholder. I feel like it makes a lot of sense for those kinds of things. But I mean, the game overall looks very cool. It looks like you've got quite a bit there, and it looks like we might have some questions. But if you have questions for Greg, make sure to drop them in chat. How was the process of building this? How long has it taken you so far, kind of from start to where you're at now, or maybe on this version of it? And how much longer do you think you've got?
Well, I went back and looked, and I created the repo for this on January 24th. So I've only been working on this since, late January, off and on. And like I said, that's in addition to working a full-time job and having a YouTube channel. And on the YouTube channel, by the way, I built 3 other games from scratch to do tutorials for. I did a Joust tutorial. I finished up a Defender series, and I did a Beam Rider tutorial. So this was all kind of just on and off on the side since January. But I mean, aside from user acceptance testing feedback, incorporating those changes and fixing any bugs that are found, it's pretty much done. I have on there that it's scheduled to release in July, but that's not set in stone. It just depends on, what people find in testing and what other things they suggest I add.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's really fast. That's nice, especially for a multiplayer game like that. I think that a lot of people could learn quite a bit, probably just from watching some of the devlogs and seeing the process. Was there anything that made it really fast or sped things up or made it a lot easier to build this than that you might have used?
Well, the lobby and relay service, definitely. Because when I first started working on this, just as a side project a couple of years ago, I was using Mirror, and I was going to have to write my own lobby and all this stuff. And I kind of got bogged down and just set it aside. So when they came out with lobby and relay, it's almost just plug and play. There's TerraDev had a really good tutorial. CodeMonkey had a really good tutorial, and I kind of watched them and then kind of took the best from those and incorporated it into my game.
Nice. Well, I think it's going to be very cool.
Fellow YouTube.
I don't know how card games do on Steam. It looks like a lot of fun. There were a couple questions from the people in chat too. Dustin was wondering which platform was the most difficult to publish to, Steam, Apple, or Google. It was Apple, but I'm very curious.
Yeah, but I had already gone through that process a couple of times before. So I have a couple other games on the Apple App Store. One's free and one's really cheap, Star Castle remake that I made. And I actually have a video on how to publish to the Apple App Store without a Mac, because I don't have a Mac. And I'm using Unity Cloud Build, and there's a bash script that will go ahead and push that built app up to test flight. And so all I have to do is push changes to my repo, and it'll kick off the build, sign it, and push it on up. And then all I have to do is go into test flight and add that build to whatever testing track, I'm running. So that's, once I had all that set up, I mean, it probably took a day to get that set up, but then it's just push a button now.
Nice. You just kind of automate that. Did you automate the entire deployment process for everything?
No. So the only thing that's automated is the iOS build and pushing it up to test flight. I'm actually building locally and using Steam's, SDK to build and sign the Steam app and push it up to their depots up there, and then I just go into the Steam app manager and set the build to whatever branch I want it to be on, and push it out to either my play test, or to the default game app branch.
Oh, okay. That makes sense for your Steam build. It's so simple. You just run that batch file and suddenly your build appears. Like, yeah, you probably don't need to litter it with other builds. And Joseph was wondering if you used AI for code stuff too, since you use Midjourney for art.
I have
you do any code?
Copilot installed, and sometimes I'll listen to it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I turn it off because it's annoying me, but not so much for the code. Like you all have talked about on the show, every once in a while, if I just don't want to go look something up, I'll just real quick type it into ChatGPT, just because I don't want to go, into the deep recesses of my brain to find that syntax that I've written before, but I just don't want to, look it up. But it's helpful in that regard. But no, most of the code is all mine.
Oh, okay. What about Corvallis? What are you doing for AI code? Do you use Copilot or other stuff?
I've actually been using Amazon's Whisper, mostly because it's free, but I've been getting a lot of mileage out of that. That's been really interesting, as well as sometimes error checking my code, so pasting it through and like very quickly writing up comments or documentations on content I already wrote. A very common one, because I've been releasing like GitHub pages lately, is I'll like write up the README for something, post into ChatGPT and say, error corrected for me, and format it. So every instance of like a file name, it'll italicize properly, all grammar and correction automatically done, rather than just right click spamming in like a word checker. But that's how I've been mostly using it, for like documentation cleanup.
Oh, okay. Interesting. I personally love Copilot. I use it all the time. It's like I find that most of the time it knows what I was gonna type, and it's not like it's picking what I'm gonna do. It's just typing exactly what I was gonna do. I just hit tab instead. Like, hey, if I name the variables, it knows based on the way that I name my variables what's probably gonna come, and I'd say at least 50% of the time it's just dead on, and I just hit tab and it completes. I really love the speed part there. That's also one of the first things that started freaking me out with AI stuff, because I was like, how the hell does it know like exactly what I'm gonna do? I could just give it variable names and it writes most of the code for me.
Yeah.
That's because that's a good indicator of also good variable names. It's able to pretty much guess how it flows just from, if you're using this variable, you have another variable, and you're starting to write an if statement, I can guess how the rest of this is probably going to go. Your code is in a way self-documenting, so the AI can pick up on those cues.
And also function names. So like in my Joust tutorial, I wanted to have a function to switch direction, and just based on the name of the function, it spit out the code that I was about to type. And like I just hit tab and there it went.
Yeah, that's what I love about it. It's just that big speed improvement. But I think Corvallis is right. It does matter a lot that you're making well-named variables and functions. I think it probably increases the value of those well-named variables and functions even more. It's always been like one of my key things I think people need to do is name shit really well, so you can tell what it is and you can fix it and you don't get confused in the future. But also, if it makes it so AI can just auto-complete a lot of stuff for you, I think that it's a huge extra benefit.
What I really do use ChatGPT for is, like, I wrote the description, like that description that's up there in your preview. That's the short description. And also the long description, I pretty much let ChatGPT write those. And they were way better than anything I would have written myself. I use it to write, my press release that I'm going to be submitting to influencers and stuff. So for that sort of thing, you just give it all like the bullet points and say, you write a press release for, and with very little modification, it can give you something really good.
Oh yeah, I think it's great at that kind of stuff. At doing any kind of speech stuff, script stuff. You got to change it a little bit because it doesn't necessarily sound like you, but it definitely, for me at least, it speeds it up because I get my mind flowing and I get there stuck with like writer's block for a while, and it's a nice like kind of shortcut.
Especially if it's like just really late at night. I've just finished coding and I need to write up the description. My head is not in a writing space. I can't think of writing. That part of my brain's off. So it's nice to be able to offload those kinds of tasks.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I do that for design stuff too. I get like loose design ideas and I'm like, hey, give me like 5 ideas based on this or 20 ideas. Or I want to make this RPG. I was like, give me 20 ideas for alien races and their relationships with each other.
Mhm.
Right. And it's going to generate like all this stuff. I'm like, okay, I take like that. I still haven't taken any for sure, but lots of ideas so far. I love that kind of stuff. That and APIs.
Mhm.
If assuming you're using the good version of ChatGPT, you just give it the link to the API and say, hey, I need to write a Unity C# wrapper for this API. Can you stub it out real quick?
So nice.
Assuming they don't have one just sitting on their page.
Yep, but it's so
a lot
much
of places
nicer
don't.
than like the postman, write it up partially, try, fail, write it up partially, try, fail. It's simplified.
Yeah, and I just copy it, try, fail, tell it failed, and then copy it, and then it works.
2 steps.
Yeah, it's a little bit quicker. So, Greg, James was asking in chat about what you're doing to market the game. Has the live stream been effective for generating wish lists, or are you doing anything else?
No, I'm actually, it's been a little discouraging that I haven't gotten as much traction. Mainly what I've been doing is I blast stuff out to Twitter. They have like wish list Friday and trailer Tuesday or Thursday and follow Friday and stuff. And I'm always, there's usually 40 or 50 of those tweets that I'll piggyback on and retweet and stuff. Also, there's probably 20 Discord channels or so that I post on in addition to mine. And on Facebook, there's probably 50 Unity game development groups or indie game groups or Steam game groups that I post stuff on. But no, it hasn't really been very effective. I think hopefully being on your show will be a little more effective.
Hopefully it gets some. Yeah. I feel like you've got to be at like a card convention type thing, right? Like you need to be like a digital card game convention type thing, or
something
like, or you want to get the
influencers that I can, submit it to, but it doesn't seem to be very many card game or board game influencers. Most of them are playing, RTS games or first person shooters or horror games and stuff like that. So it's hard to find any that I think could really get it out there.
I wonder if you get some that are playing some of the like Hearthstone and what's the Riot card game, those kinds of games. Maybe get some of those people that kind of streaming that genre to do it. I don't know. I very rarely watch people play games. So, like weird for game development. Watching other people drives me. I just instantly just want to start coding. I get distracted. I'm like, I want to go make some more code stuff for the game. So another question, I think this is also for Greg, about what design principles you followed. Did the game component or the game components designed so that they can be kind of reused, or is there like a specific design pattern or workflow, or you all MVC or some other setup that you've used? Can you just high level cover it?
It's typical of a Unity game, right? But I do try to follow solid principles. Although in my most recent devlog, you do notice that the one class I was working in was like 700 lines long, so I need to go in there and chop that up. But I do try to abstract things. One thing I pointed out in the most recent devlog is the way I architected it. So if you go to play a card, I'm doing a server RPC, so it's server authoritative, and you say, I'm going to try and play a card from this pile to that pile. And then the server evaluates that and says if it's legal or not, and then it will do a client RPC so all the players can update their local copy of the cards. Well, because of the way I architected it, when I went to add bot players, all I had to do was have the bots do a server RPC call to try and play a card. And I followed up one of your examples from one of your tutorials, actually from the mastery course, where instead of having an update method on all these things, I have like one update method in the manager, and then he calls tick methods on the bots. And then in their tick method, they have a hierarchy of plays they'll try and do from the best possible play down to the least favorable play. So they're always going to make the best possible play. And their skill level is just determined by how much of a delay between plays they have, how fast they can play. But yeah, having that architected that way, plugging in a bot was trivial.
Nice. Yeah, that is awesome. It's important to do too. I feel like when you're making your multiplayer games, it's easy to screw that up. Like, it's very, very, very easy to mess that up and have. I'm sorry, having flashbacks of scenarios of all kinds of network bugs and exploits and things, and the near impossibility of adding bots. Yeah, some past projects. Let's go on to the next question. This one I think is for everybody. So it says, I switched to 2022 LTS to learn ECS. Do y'all think DOTS is ready for a full game?
Personally, I just upgraded my my virtual production project from 2020 to 2021. Now the 2022 is out because the absolute latest is going to be somewhat bug filled. I personally recommend the year before because it's had longer in development. It's more stable. I think this came up in the show I was on as well, where your high mentioned it as well, where you probably don't want the absolute latest LTS because it's still going to have problems and stability
But for
issues.
DOTS, that's not really an option, right? For DOTS, they've got to be on 2022. So do you guys think, I mean, from what I've seen, it seems like DOTS is production ready and good to go and people are making games. I'm sure there are still some random little edge cases and stuff and probably some unsupported things that Johnny would be complaining about right now. But from what I understand of what I've seen, it seems like it's full on ready. I was actually considering it for this project that I was working on. If I'm struggling like really hard fighting the urge to make it a VR RPG just because I keep playing with these VR headsets again and it's so fun looking at the characters and environments in there. If I do though, it's probably going to end up in DOTS. But either way, I've switched fully over to 22 LTS. But I also don't have like any client projects that I have to worry about stability for or anything like that. So I feel like getting it access to all of the latest features and stuff is more than worth it for the occasional Unity crash or whatever.
But yeah, for DOTS, I would definitely say go with 2022. If you're designing with DOTS in mind, that is the best time to get into it and to introduce because it's more or less out of preview. It's more stable than it ever has been. So if you wanted to build your game with it and release it, 2022 is the way to go.
Yeah, I'm not using DOTS. And I haven't updated the 2022 for Highland Panic, but the latest tutorial I'm making, I'm doing a multiplayer Ludo game for my next tutorial, and I'm using the latest 2022 for that. So we'll see how that goes.
Although I will say I do have to dip, but thanks so much for having me on, guys.
Yeah.
Oh, no,
Nice
it was
meeting you.
good having you. And maybe next week we'll see you again. So bye, Corvallis.
Absolutely.
Everybody go. Let me pop up your channel real quick. Go subscribe. Go check them out. And we'll see them again very soon. All right. See you later. Thanks for coming, man. Thank
you for having me.
So we've got another question specifically for you, Greg. Let's just, let me see if I can get your game up there. It says that it looks like most of your marketing is to kind of reach other developers, and they're wondering or thinking maybe you should figure out how to market to other players.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. And that's why I'm looking into finding some influencers and trying to get a press release out to try to get it out to players. I am starting to broaden my audience a little bit in what where I post on Twitter and Facebook and stuff, because I have been mostly focusing on developer groups. That's definitely true.
Yeah, it's weird because it's like the audience that and it's the people that you talk to and all that, but it's not really the audience for playing the. It's like the audience that's going to talk to you so much about the development process, the little bugs and all that kind of stuff, but they're not the same ones that are going to like sit there and just play the game on their phone at home or on their iPad and stuff. It's like totally different and a much smaller market. There's a lot more people that will go home and actually play the game than will be interested in the development process.
Yeah. And I'm actually working at cross purposes because I'm also trying to have my YouTube channel, which is really targeting developers. And since I've started doing devlogs for Highland Panic, my subscription count, my new subscribers count has just plummeted like in half.
Oh, yeah.
Which I think is interesting. It seems like my audience really wants me to do new tutorials and they could care less about my Highland Panic devlogs.
That makes sense. Yeah, it's definitely like a totally different audience too. I found that like when I do anything that's very different, it ends up with just like subscribers on the video are negative instead of positive, and like no growth at all. It just went down because it did something totally unrelated to the other things. So I've been thinking about making another channel for all the other random crap that I want to do. So I feel like it's got to be separate, but. Yeah, you're gonna find some good. If anybody happens to know any gaming YouTubers that stream stuff, hook us up. Let Greg know so we can get him to stream some stuff. Hopefully, and get some contacts in there. We got a couple more questions. Melanie was asking how long I think an RPG will take to make when making it alone. My goal is like first playable version a month, and then like a decent good vertical slice in like 2 to 3 months that covers most of the stuff, assuming that I'm not creating a lot of art. Right, I've got all the art already done, and that stuff's kind of worked out. That doesn't mean it'll necessarily be good, but it'll be done in that amount of time. I think that's definitely reasonable. And the RPG I've got in mind is going to be it's a little bit weird. I want to talk about it soon, but it's a bunch of different stuff, and it would be a whole bunch of different game modes and things going on.
Is it going to be for the Apple Pro?
That is one of the things that's killing me is with the headset. So I wasn't thinking about doing it in VR at all, but now with the Apple headset and the Quest 3 coming out, I was considering like. It's the kind of experience I want it to be more of like a storytelling, less actiony type thing anyway. And I feel like that could work really well in there in VR, but yeah, it might. It's still 50-50. Hopefully I've got it kind of started, but hopefully I'll publicly start it in the next couple days. I don't know. I have to make the commitment to it. I'm just afraid afraid to jump in, I guess. So there was a question here, I guess, for both of us. Do you have any experience using the Steam API and creating items that you can trade?
This is my first game ever being published on Steam. So I have very little experience with Steam at all prior to this, except playing games on it. So no.
Oh, okay. Yeah, very complicated from what I remember. It's been a very long time since I played with the API. It's probably changed a bit. But from what I recall, it wasn't too complicated. I mean, the Steam APIs in general are pretty easy, and there are wrappers that, at least last time I looked, there were wrappers in the asset store that handled it. But yeah, it's been a while since I did it. I don't remember the items specifically though, but I do remember all of the rest of I remember the Steam API being generally pretty easy. If anybody in chat has any recent experience with that, though, please let me know. I'm kind of curious. He said, I'd love to see a VR tutorial or VR RPG tutorial. I think it'd be a lot of fun, too. The one other problem that I run into with it, though, is that performance on the headsets when doing video recording while using the headset, I have to figure out a way to kind of keep it from killing the game performance while I'm doing the recording and stuff. But yeah, and it makes it very difficult to do the development on the laptop. But I don't know. It'll be interesting. I really, really want to do it. I think it'll be fun. Okay, somebody was asking a question about optimizing for mobile. Is that something that you've had to dive into yet with Highland Panic?
Well, I mean, I'm using addressables to try and reduce load time. Just the standard optimizations you do for any Unity game. Obviously, you want your graphics to be, you don't want them to all be 2048, So I basically take them down as small as I can get them and still have them look good. Same thing with the audio files, and maybe even set the quality at like 25% on the audio files so they're not, chewing up resources. But just other than that, just the standard optimizations you would do, object pooling, that sort of thing.
Okay, so you're shrinking everything down on the import settings, and then this pooling and stuff, and then you said addressables too. For people who haven't used addressables yet, everybody in chat, if you've used addressables, you just put in a 1 and a 2, or a yes and a no. Just say, have you used addressables? Put yes or no. I'm just really curious to see what people have how many people have actually used addressables. But can you tell everybody who hasn't used addressables, just kind of loosely what they are and how you use it and why?
Well, it's kind of like a prefab, except you only load it when you need it. So like if you put a prefab on a game object, it's going to load that prefab even before you need to use it. So by making it an asset reference to your addressable, like for all my sound clips, they're all addressables. And so when I go to play a sound clip, I'm actually passing in an asset reference. And then if I haven't already loaded and cached that, I'll grab it, cache it, and then from there on out, I'll use the cached version. Same thing with like the portrait images and stuff like that. Because Uri, I think it was Uri pointed out, the initial game load was like 30 seconds when I first had a Windows build of it. And it was because it was loading all these portrait images and stuff. So I basically had the title screen very, very light. And in the background, asynchronously, I'm loading all those addressables that I need to have loaded for the actual title, the lobby scene. So yeah, that basically improves the load time. And also by only loading things when you need them, like the audio clips, you're not, clogging up your memory.
Yeah, and you're not loading in any textures for cards that you're not using. Do you have that as a situation? Are there cards that are only used in some games?
When you mention all the art you need for a card game, my game is actually quite simple compared to like a trading card game, because really there's only 4 different images that could be on a card. There's like a portrait that's in the center of the card, and it's either a Highland lad or a Highland lass. And then there's a little small Highland lad or lass that's standing up in the corners. And the reason they're gendered like that is because, in solitaire, when you have your buffer piles, you can play in descending order, but they have to alternate red, black, red, black. Well, in Highland Panic, they alternate boy, girl, boy, girl. So you need to be able to tell quickly at a glance, is this a boy or a girl? But I have one little prefab for a card UI, and I basically swap out the portrait image, the background color, the corner image, and then the Text Mesh Pro is just the numbers are Text Mesh Pro. So there's like no textures being used there really. It's just very minimal what's being rendered for a card.
I'm curious on the addressables too. Do you stream those down for the mobile builds? No,
I have several optimizations in mind. I want to start using, cloud content delivery, so I can change the content if I want to based on feedback without having to do a whole new build and push it up. And in the same way, be able to just pull them down instead of just shipping them out with the build. That's definitely on my list of optimizations.
Yeah, I know that's one of the key uses for addressables, being able to ship out small updates and small patches. If you can just update those prefabs and object stuff, it makes it a lot easier to deliver that. You don't have to go through the update process. So Dustin had a question about mobile developments that haven't really investigated Unity mobile development. And I understand optimizing assets, but are there any features or gotchas that you just can't use in mobile dev? Is there anything that you thought about maybe turning on? You're like, nope, I'm going to turn that back off. I mean, with a card game, I don't know that you necessarily were too likely to run into any of those things. You probably didn't go to the HD render pipeline or
I'm using URP. But I wouldn't use HDRP for mobile. But I haven't run into any performance issues with the games that I've published in mobile. They're all pretty small and not doing a whole lot.
Yeah, typically it ends up being rendering related issues a lot of the time with mobile stuff, having too many draw calls. Sometimes there's CPU stuff, but most of the time, in my experience, I've usually had problems on the rendering side and having to just optimize the hell out of that. And occasionally some stuff with input, but it's usually not too big. But there's another question here from Melanie about RPG developing. And one more question. Do you recommend using free dialogue from Unity Asset Store or making it from scratch? I think the one I'm actually going to use is the dialogue for Unity Asset. I grabbed it in one of the semi-recent sales. It was half off or 70% off or something like that. But it seems pretty powerful. It's got a lot of functionality built in, and it kind of I don't really necessarily want to rebuild a dialogue system because I feel like I've built dozens of them in the past, and I can just use this one that already does all the stuff that I want. Plus, it has they added a Chat GPT integration, an extra plugin that I of course grabbed too, that will just generate the dialogue trees for you for some placeholders. So I can just give it the NPCs and tell it to give me, like a 10 tree dialogue about this topic, and it'll do it and put in some placeholder stuff, which if I was a good writer and a game designer, I probably wouldn't like, but since I'm not, it's awesome. It'll really speed things up for me. I can just put in some dialogue that kind of gets the point across for the things that I want. I don't expect to have a ton of dialogue, so I don't want to spend a lot of time building the thing myself. I don't know what the free one is, though. Have you used any of the dialogue systems from the asset store?
No, like I said, I haven't done an RPG, so haven't had a use for anything like that. I could see maybe using it in a tutorial, but no, I haven't.
Okay. Yeah, it's definitely, like I said, the dialogue for Unity system is pretty good, and it integrates into a bunch of the other systems. It was one of the key selling points for me. So it integrates into RPG Builder and one or two of the other ones I was looking at using. I don't remember what they were anymore, though. I've got a big list of them. I have a whole Milanote board saved off and ready to go. Looks like there was a comment here. I'm curious on your thoughts on this comment, but about having to deal with navigation bars and toolbars and stuff with mobile. Have you run into any issues with that?
I've run into two issues on mobile that wouldn't be an issue on Steam. One is if someone texts you while you're playing, it's like, get out of here. You gotta swipe that thing up. The other is if someone calls you while you're playing. I had a friend that's happened to him on his Android. It paused the game in the background, which essentially caused my network connection to just time out.
Yep.
So when they came back, everything was kind of froze up. So I need to handle somehow reconnecting when you come back after a call like that. But those are the only like mobile specific issues I've run into with it.
Yeah, that's one of the bigger ones, dealing with that kind of the context switch and the network dropping. They're both big problems, and if you don't reconnect fast enough, or let the player know what's going on, it causes some issues, especially if they come back and they lost. You're like, oh no. So there's a question about the bots. Dustin was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about the bots, and you mentioned that you made them more difficult just by like how fast they pick the right decision, but can you talk like kind of how that works, and how did you just add bots to the game? Is that just another server process, or how does that all kind of kick off and work?
Yeah, so it is, whoever creates the game is the host and the client, and their host version of the game manager will instantiate a bot player class for each bot that's in the game. And in the update, in the game manager's update, I just call tick on each of those bot managers. And they have a play delay, which is set based on their skill level. So a beginner bot can only play once every 6 seconds. And there's some variability in there, like half a second, more or less, but always on average about 6 seconds. And then an intermediate bot is every 4 seconds. And then an advanced bot is every 2 seconds. And for me, because I understand the game and I've gotten pretty good at it, I can have a very competitive game against intermediate bots and almost always beat them. But the advanced bots are extremely tough for me. So, I mean, I've had some close games where I've almost beat them, but it's very, very competitive. And that's the only difference in the skill level. And so, as I mentioned, they have a hierarchy, basically a hierarchy tree. They're going to try the very best possible play first. And if there's no card that can make that play, then they go to the next one and the next one. And if they can't make any play, I'm just going to draw cards, from the draw deck, and then reset their play delay so they can't play again until that time elapses. So they're always going to make the most intelligent, best possible play. And what I could maybe do is add some variability in that too. Instead of having them always make the best play, add some variability to that too, to make it a little
chance that they like skip the best play and go on to the next one.
Yeah.
The dumber they are. Yeah. You're just gotta intentionally dumb them down, huh? But overall, you said the process of adding the bots was pretty simple, right? You just
It was.
created the new ones and they worked as a player.
Yeah. So in there, they have a attempt play method basically, and they make the client or the server RPC call to say, I'm trying to play this card from this pile to that pile, and then it just broadcasts it to all the other players. And the game manager doesn't care if it's a bot making that play or a human player double clicking a card to make that play. It's just all abstracted out.
That's definitely the way to do it. You want to keep that all separated. I'm curious, before we dive on to more questions, it looks like there's a few more. And if you have questions, feel free to ask them in chat. Did you do any automated testing or unit testing in this project at all?
No.
Okay. I assumed with your short timeline there, because you said you started it in January, that you probably hadn't, but I didn't know, since it's so abstracted and separated away, I didn't know if maybe you'd had thrown some in there.
Yeah, so in my hack and plan roadmap, I have a whole refactoring step, and I'm going to add unit tests during that refactoring step. So
do you need it?
Do I need it?
Do you need the refactoring step?
Maybe not. I mean, it just depends on how many features I want to add in the future. Like I don't currently have a way to play disconnected. Right.
Oh, okay.
So because I'm using lobby and relay, from the very beginning of the game, you have to be able to have a network connection to even get into the game. So I want to look into adding a disconnected mode. And I think before I want to go making those kind of changes, I want to get good unit test coverage in my code, which is probably going to force me to refactor it to make it more testable. So yeah, kill two birds with one stone there.
Now that makes sense. That's kind of a good point, where you would want to do it when you're going to do those big refactors that are very likely to break a couple things here and there constantly throughout the process that you just miss, and you want to be able to not break those things. So you break them and then instantly know that they broke and fix them. Eric had a point in the chat about things for mobile to look out for too, which is that you generally can't use reflection. I know on the Apple devices, I assume it's still like that on Android too, but you couldn't just dynamically load libraries at runtime, primarily for security stuff.
Also, they're saying they wouldn't want you to use cloud content delivery in a mobile app?
No, I think that they will. It's not that. It's just that if you're doing reflection to load them. So if you load the addressables, I think you can get all the content and stuff in. I just don't know. I've forgotten the restrictions. It's been quite a while since I dove into iOS and Android stuff outside of VR. So yeah. But yeah, it is definitely something to think about and consider. That's why I usually, when I use reflection and stuff, it tends to be for editor related things, or maybe a PC only example or server side examples and stuff where it makes a little bit more sense. It definitely can be a security issue on the clients. So yeah, essentially hot loading a DLL. And people are happy to see you on here.
Well, I'm happy to be here. Oh, by the way, Jason, do you recognize this?
Oh shit! Oh, that was awesome. I almost had the pants on. I've got a matching pair of pants that go with that. But they were.
I need to have my mug that I got from you too. The one with the bug, flicking the bug off the mug.
Yeah, that's my one's hilarious. It cracked the debug mug.
Yeah.
The second I saw that one flicking of the bugs. Yeah, that one's great. I've got a couple of them around here, all different kinds. Yeah, I have a ridiculous amount of my own merch stuff, and everybody thinks that I make robots. So everybody outside the office, they see the sign, they're like, "What kind of robots are you making?" And then they see the little hoodie, like, "What's in there?" And then they look inside, and it's just a bunch of video games, and they get disappointed. Anyway, I don't know if we had any other questions. I think that was it for the questions. So you're saying you're going to release in July, right?
Well, that's the tentative release date. And again, it just depends on how much feedback I get from user acceptance testing, and if there's any major changes that I think I need to make before I release it. Right now, it's been minor stuff like tweaking the card colors. I had one tester say they couldn't really tell when the round started, and so they want me to add a countdown. I want to add a pause feature because like people saying they're playing the game and then they have to go help their kids with something. There's no way to pause the game. So I want to add that, which I don't think would be that difficult.
Yeah, that would definitely be handy. So you just got a couple little features to add in there. And if people want to get in and play it, how can they do that? I mean, I'm going to link the Steam page, obviously, but if they want to get in and beta test and help out.
Yeah, I can also paste in the chat the link to the iPhone beta. And it's not currently an open beta on the Android, but it will be soon. So let me go ahead and get that link. But yeah, go to my Steam page and it's in open play test there. You can just play it directly from there. And then this link here is to join the open beta on the iPhone. So I don't know if that just went to you.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. I'll put that into chat so everybody can go join the iPhone beta. I'm gonna try it out, give it a play, and see if you can beat Greg or the bots.
Well, another suggestion I had, one of the guys on Discord suggested that I add something when you're playing solo against bots, and then a new multiplayer game opens up that you can join to give you a little like toast message or something to give you an opportunity to go leave that solo game and go join a multiplayer game.
Oh yeah, it's not a bad idea when as soon as somebody's waiting, if you're just waiting around, just go jump in, and you get a lot more of the. It's one of the problems when you have a small base to start off when they're doing the multiplayer. If they don't time it right, they don't happen to hit within the same 15 seconds of each other, then they end up just playing against bots constantly.
Well,
yeah, definitely.
Worse than that, Jason, the first playtest version I put out didn't have bots. And so you join the game and there's nobody on, and you can basically play solitaire, which is just you playing solitaire, which I mean, there's plenty of better solitaire games out there, right? So one of the first updates I did was to add bots to make it testable.
Oh, it makes a huge, huge difference in just being able to backfill the empty spots with those. Until you can build up that user base. Dustin had a question. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this one. It said, any hobbyist or part-time devs? So asking for everybody in chat as well. But do you find it's more important to get your game out there or make it commercially successful? So, what is more important for you? Getting the game out there done and it works and has positive reviews, or that it makes a certain amount of money and is a financial? Where do you kind of balance it? Because I assume it's like, it's hard to say. Like they're both important, but which one's more important and how much more important? I guess.
Well, I would say the conventional wisdom is get something out there to start building your portfolio. And don't worry about if it flops or not. Thomas Brush is really big on this. Just release a game. Mm-hmm. And so I think for the first few games, he said your first couple of games are going to stink. I'm hoping that this one, which is not my first one, will not stink and that it will be successful.
Yeah, I mean, you've got all of the core gameplay stuff. It's just it's going to come down to whether or not card games are sellable or not. I don't really know. I'm a big fan of like collectible card games, and I play those all the time. So I know those have like a big market and sell really well, but they also have like a huge value per user. Like I spend way more money than I should playing them, like versus like a single use game or not a single purchase game. I mean, interesting. Well, I hope that it does great. I think it looks very interesting. Looks cool.
Thank you.
Let's see. Are there any other questions? Oh, one more question. Take one or two more questions before we wrap things up. Was there any pen and paper prototyping involved in your game design? And you had mentioned that this is actually kind of based on an actual existing card game, right? So how much prototyping of the differences and changes and stuff did you have to do too?
Pretty much none. So like I mentioned, it's based on a game called Dutch Blitz. It's not exactly the same, but it's very similar. And that's based on, I don't know if it's based on, because there were two very almost identical games, Nerds and Dutch Blitz. And this is kind of an interesting backstory. in the mid 90s, I reached out to the Dutch Blitz Game Company to ask if they would like me to make them a computer version of their game. And they were very, very excited about it. And they're a small company up in Pennsylvania, Dutch country in Pennsylvania. And so I made a prototype in Visual C++, MFC.
Okay.
And it was a desktop, game. It was single player against bots. And they were very excited about it, but then they just stopped talking to me. I think they were just afraid to venture into it. Well, then they reached out to me again in like 2006, and they wanted to resurrect the idea. So I made a online version in ASP.NET using Silverlight for the front end. And now they were really excited. And so I drafted up like a rough draft of a contract about how we would go forward publishing this. Where would it be hosted? Who would host it? How would we handle royalties and all this stuff. And they got cold feet again and stopped talking to me. So I had already written this game twice, but never multiplayer. So really all I had to do is look at a couple tutorials by CodeMonkey and TerraDev on multiplayer, sit down and just get a base prototype together for getting the lobby going. And then the basic gameplay I already knew how to do because I'd done it twice, and making sure that I did it in a way that I could come back and add bots. So yeah, no pen and paper prototyping really, but I did plan it out in Hack and Plan, just broad strokes, Yeah,
and planning is definitely going to be an important part, especially for how fast you got that done. Yorai is here. Hello, Yorai. Welcome. I don't know if you've been following along, seeing Greg's
I got like 3 minutes of talking in between rides here, so.
Okay,
yeah.
We've been going over Greg's game. The process is talking about the development, building out bots, the multiplayer stuff, and all of that. And now there's a question about releasing. Would you wait to release your game, or wait a bit if it has less than 1,000 wish lists, or is there like a number of wish lists you're waiting for?
Well, I was overly optimistic in how many wish lists I thought I would get. What would you all recommend? That's something I'm honestly curious about. Is it better to go ahead and release it and get it out there, or wait until you get a certain number of wish lists?
So generally speaking, I don't have a lot of experience with releases because Terraria has been out since 2011, and
you release updates every month.
Yeah, but
the
when
last
you already
version.
have so it would be a difficult question. There is the trade-off of if you don't have an audience to play it immediately, there is no social proof of, hey, people are playing this, you should play it as well. On the other end, if you never release, then you're basically not going to make like any proof that you actually worked at all. If you're trying to get hired for like other jobs, etc., and you're not getting the experience of dealing with releases going forward. So I would suggest heavy research. It's not a binary yes, no, immediate.
Yeah, I have no idea what you should do there. I'm always a big fan of just putting shit out though, and just not waiting. I hate waiting for stuff because I feel like it's very easy for me, at least, to procrastinate and wait for no good reason. And then when I start the thing, I'm like, I should have started this or should have done this or released this thing a long time ago. I've never once released something and I should have done that later. So I always have the opposite feeling. So, but I think that's just me, and I don't know if that has anything to do with actual performance. I think that's just my brain.
Well, it looks like people are recommending early access.
Yeah, so I have something to say about this, and it is your game only releases once. Even if you tag it with early access, you're not getting the full 2 rounds of release. And there is a very clear explanation on why. When your game is early access, people already know what is in it, and they're judging it based on what they see in it at that time. Which means, if the game isn't good at that early phase, that's where your reviews start coming in. And if your reviews are not as stellar as they can be for a full release, there is going to be a problem with that full release. So your game only releases once. So if you're going for early access, you have to make sure it's at its best for that early access. You can keep adding on content, but that has to be at a level of like a vertical slice, not a prototype of what it can be, not a this is a basket that is eventually going to be full of very sweet fruits and it's going to live up to the full potential of being a fruit salad. This is not what it is. It has to be like good from the start, and you can add more on top. If you watch all the like most successful ones, they'll have a very good base that people will want to see growing and like follow it along. And then they keep adding things on top, like Risk of Rain 2 also did a campaign where like you bought one and you gave it to another. That helps the spread, because if it's a co-op game, you get to co-op with somebody from your own purchase. So that was like a very big thing for it.
So it looks like mixed reviews there. The question earlier on about my Steam, wasn't a question, it was more of a comment about my Steam page, not slapping them in the face. I struggled to come up with a good trailer and good screenshots, because there's really only one scene in the game, right? You got your game board and you just have cards, right? And so they don't really want to see UI elements and stuff in your screenshots. I did add like the tutorial screens there toward the end. So yeah, I'm open to suggestions on how I can make it pop more.
Well, there is one more thing I should probably bring up from the comments regarding early access, which is there is someone mentioned there is a stigma for early access. I don't think the problem is the stigma, more so that there are people who have proved they are putting a product on early access with the promise, again, that eventually it's reaching 1.0, but then they lose the motivation halfway. And because they lose the motivation, they stop developing it, or whatever other circumstances that hit them. As a result, people are very wary of buying a half-finished game, because the tag early access means not finished, and then not being sure they'll ever get a full product. So you have to give a lot of confidence to people that your early access is actually going to reach 1.0, which requires being very consistent, which requires showing that you have the actual qualities necessary for it. Early access has its own like costs and trade-offs. It's not a silver bullet for, if you're not sure about it, just use early access. Just want to be very clear here.
Thanks.
Yeah. In regards to visibility, there is a statement to be made for the ability to read the name in a very small font if you are including the name on the title. If you don't have, so for example, when you're watching the top 100 Steam games, it's going to give you a list, and each list has like a small thumbnail or a logo, or call it whatever you will, but it's a very small one. So you have to fit whatever text you want to fit in it clearly, so people can actually read it, recognize it. And if you can't do that, just go for a really good image and maybe put it, like some of the text inside. But like that one is really important, making sure that the logo image is actually like pretty appealing and attractive, because when people are going to like cover your game, they may use screenshots, but they may also use your logo, like the art at the top right. That there is a more specific name for it that I'm forgetting right now. But you want that to be like something that's usable for media. There's a reason why a lot of like popular products have press kits. That said, I don't know if every indie game necessarily needs it. There's like some value to being indie and having like grassroots and people supporting and like making their own art for it.
But you have to kind of do that when you fill out the Steam page. You got to do all the graphics. But yeah, I think that like out of all the things, this part definitely could. It's the main thing that's going to draw people to click on your page, and
the capsule.
It could be a lot more panicky, a little less generic, and more like get people's eyes staring right at it. I don't know exactly how.
I will consult some graphic artists and ask about that. What I could do to improve that.
Consult some AI, have it generate a whole. You're gonna probably come up with something cool, like just curious. Like it's something that like just got people to look and click and say like, what is this? But also still gives them the idea that it's a card game, right? So they know a card with something crazy on it or something that gives the panic. I don't know. I'm a terrible artist.
Yeah, the hardest part, honestly, with publishing to Steam was getting all the images to meet their criteria for the capsule images, library images, and they were very, very particular.
Yeah, Color Optimist mentioned emphasizing the panic too. I think that can make sense, especially you're like racing against other players, and I don't know if you really call that out. That it's like a.
It's in the description, the long description, I think.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it's
Race.
not. It's not obvious.
Yeah, yeah. If it was maybe the race against was kind. Yeah, race to be the first player. Yeah, I don't know. I'm terrible at marketing stuff like that. So.
Well, when you want to learn how the successful people do it, you usually watch what the successful people actually did. So find products that are relevant and figure out what works for the theme, like what actually gets the clicks when you're talking about Panic and when you're talking about like card games. Maybe there's going to be like a repeating pattern of like there is a card at the top left or something. I don't know. Usually, if you look at all those like big games from the PS3 era, or like the Dark Souls and No Man's Sky, I think it was. No, I'm getting confused. There were like a lot of games where you watch a hero from their back in the vast world, like in front of them. That's like a repeating pattern that the big games would do for themselves, and the smaller games that get less successful would not do. So if you're trying to be successful, you imitate the successful usually, or you're treading your own path, which is not as reliable. But like if you truly believe in it and you have like reasons to back it up, go for it. In regards to the cards, I will say color theory matters a lot. You want to be able to have the game accessible to people who are visually impaired. So usually it's not like color swapping where the value or the brightness of the card stays the same. You want actual contrast between the brightness levels of the cards. So like one is darker, one is brighter, in case they can't match it solely based on hue. You want the cards to be easily like recognizable over one another. So if there's like 3 blue cards near each other, you can actually see it's 3 blue cards, which right now if the colors are flat, you're not going to get that. There are a bunch of things regarding color theory alone, but there's also the concept of salience. The thing that you want players to pay most attention to is going to have like certain attributes that you don't want to give other things. For example, big filled blobs of color are salient because like your eye can notice them on like the fuzzy test. Like if your eyes are blurry, you can still see the big blob of color, but if it's just like a line, it may get blurred out. You won't see the color as clearly. Sharp corners are salient, so you pay attention to the corner itself. That's why sharp text is like harder, quote unquote, to ignore versus like blobby text. You don't want like buttons that you want to click to have like colored outlines that are sharp. You want it like round, so you pay less attention to that. You want actual color fill, so you can see the button and not just the outline of the button. You want the person to be able to read the text on it, so you want sharp text inside. Yeah, just a bunch of stuff like that. There is a really good video, The Science of Great UI, on YouTube. And there are UI Infinity Gems, another video that's really worth taking a look at. Yeah.
Cool. Well, guys, I've really enjoyed this, but I'm way over my lunch break. So I probably should get back to work before my boss comes pinging me to find out what happened to me.
It's all right. It's about time to start wrapping things up anyway. So it's been a great show. It's really cool. I hope that everybody goes and checks out the game and goes and subscribe to the channel. Go, subscribe to Midnight Oil. Go check out Greg's channel. And of course, go check out Corvallis' channel as well. If you were here with us, he was there all the first half of the show talking about AI stuff. And also, whoops, there we go. You're doing Yora. I don't know if you saw the email, but we're going to do a 1-day AI event. So kind of off of the Game Dev Guild, just want to do like a 1-day AI focused thing that's free for everybody to come out to, or just have a bunch of sessions on whatever is going on, the latest stuff in AI over the next, I guess it's going to be a month, because it's going to be in August 26th. And there's
quite far away.
Yeah, I want to give
Yeah.
people a little bit of time, figure out the different talks and the different things that are coming, and hopefully get Unity. Maybe they'll have something there. I don't know. I haven't asked them yet, but I'm hoping that they'll do something with their AI stuff. I don't know if they have a timeline on that yet, but I'm gonna give them time, and maybe they'll be ready, and I'll be ready, and we can all talk about AI stuff or see what's out there. At the very least, I want to learn all of the latest and greatest tools and things that are available, and make sure that that's available to everybody else too. So should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, sounds awesome. I've been kind of like making a document to introduce AI to some people in my family because they're like really interested. So they asked me to, and I'm like, what do I actually tell them? There's so much to go over. So I started like calling out the things that are like less relevant out of the list.
Yeah, I'm constantly telling people, get in on it. It'll make a big difference. It's super helpful. Well, all right. Thanks again, everybody. Thanks everybody for coming out and joining us. Please hit the like, subscribe, and share buttons, and go check out Greg's game. If you have comments or thoughts on Greg's game, drop them down below, or just go subscribe to his channel and drop them onto the devlogs so that you can see them and you can kind of chat. Are you doing those devlogs live, by the way? Sorry, my last question.
No, I'm not. The most recent one, I didn't really edit. I just recorded me working and then very minimal editing pushed it up. I might do some live ones. We'll see.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, if you do, hopefully people hop in on those too and start asking some questions. Have fun. All right. Well, thanks again, everybody. We will be back next week with lots of other exciting game dev related stuff, and I think a couple more AI things. All right. Bye, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.